go. Welcome to Creative Integration Lab. Today we're talking about shame and judgment and how to work on releasing shame and judgment in our breathwork practice. So we are only doing a very short dive on this topic. If you find that it's helpful and you want more of this content, please let us know. You can email anytime to admin@breathworkonline.com. I'm going to type that in the chat real quick. Also, if you have to leave early for any reason, this is being recorded. The link to the recording will be sent out in the newsletter either next Tuesday or the Tuesday after, depending on how quickly we prep it for you. And if you miss it for any reason, you can also email admin@breathworkonline.com and ask us to send you the link, and we're happy to do that. I like to begin by acknowledging that all of us are coming from different locations. It's a different part of our day, depending on where we live and what time zone we're in. So I want to acknowledge that and honor that and start where we are. So I always like to invite people to post in the chat, and I'll read as many as I can. You can post where you're located as well as how you are feeling right now. So my one word for how I'm feeling right now is calm, calm. So take a moment, take a breath, check in with your body, find one word about how you are right now, type it in the chat as well as where you're located. I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington in the United States. And my word is calm. We have Deborah from Orlando, tired. I love it. Content in the UK, beautiful. Calm but tired in the UK, wonderful. Scattered in San Francisco, what a great word. Phoenix, Arizona, relaxed, beautiful. Let's just read a couple more as they pop up here. Taking a moment while people are answering to really feel your breath. You don't have to change it, just notice it and really feel your seat beneath you. I always say wiggling your toes is a superpower, and I'm wiggling my toes right now. That also helps ground immediately. We have slightly stressed and scattered from Tierra Verde, beautiful. Frazzled in California, what a great word. Tired in San Luis Obispo, California. Lovely. So I want to invite you to continue typing in chat. If you haven't checked in yet, I won't read any more out loud, but I want to invite everyone to check in with a word. Talking about shame and judgment can be a little tricky sometimes because even approaching the topic can get us a little bit stirred up. I don't know if anyone is feeling stirred up right now, but you can be excited for the content, but still feel a little bit activated or worried. We're not going to go too much in depth with the topic. But I want to, before we begin and dive in, I want to really acknowledge that there's something called a knot of shame. Knot as in when you tie a knot, K-N-O-T. And what happens is sometimes if we're someone who was taught that we shouldn't have feelings and that we need to be stoic or professional or manly or strong or whatever adjective fits here. Some of us were taught not to show emotion. So when we talk about shame or when shame or self-judgment comes up, all of a sudden we are ashamed for having shame because we're not supposed to have these emotions and feelings. And so then when they come up or we try to talk about it, it's just we're ashamed, and then it knocks over the top being ashamed for being ashamed. So I want to invite you all to really just pay attention to your body. If you start to feel confused or your head gets a little bit buzzy, you can grab some nice cold water. That'll help bring you back. You can wiggle your toes. Like I said, it's a superpower. And you can also just be fine with it. Don't judge yourself for being a little bit disconnected as we talk about a topic that can be a little bit triggering for some people. So just pay attention to how your head is doing. Are you with us? Are you confused? And know that you can always come back and watch the recording, and you can take it at your own speed. And again, we're not going to go super deep. But I wanted to really name that knot of shame because it's something that pops up with specific genders, specific cultures, specific families because of family traditions. Different people approach emotions different ways, and sometimes we can feel ashamed that we have shame. And releasing that knot, we'll go over some tips for that while we talk together. So let's center and ground. So I'm going to rock and move around in my seat a little bit, and I'm going to encourage you to do the same. And what I'm doing here is I'm just testing out how I'm sitting to find my center. And I'm going to sigh a little bit and breathe a little more deeply. I'm actually going to wiggle my arms and fingers as well and just stretch for a second to really get in my body. I'm going to encourage you to do the same. If your neck needs to stretch, go ahead and stretch that. Do whatever is right for your body and feels good. You can have your eyes open or closed and just really find a more comfortable seat where you feel really supported. Right now, I just moved so that my weight is distributed evenly. I just rested my arms so that they fall straight down and are supported by the armrests on my chair. I'm going to take another deep breath. And I'm going to take one more deep breath in through my nose and sigh it out through my mouth. And I'm going to make noise. You're welcome to join me. Does anyone feel a little more centered, a little more supported, or a little more awake? If so, you can type it in the chat. I'm feeling more centered and like I'm more connected to my brain. You can also hear my voice is a little deeper. We have one yes, feeling a little more centered. So centering, grounding, we grounded when we wiggled our toes as well as when we moved to a good spot in our chair. And then being present. Connecting with your body and moving your body a little bit brings us more present. We have more balanced, feeling more aware. Beautiful. So this tool of just moving and wiggling a bit, taking a breath or two, sighing out anything we need to sigh out to release, this is a tool to reground and also a tool to combat shame or judgment and to bring us present again. So it's something that you can do at any point as we talk together. So I've mentioned the knot of shame. I've mentioned grounding, centering, embodying, and being present. I talked about confusion, how that can come up sometimes. And so the next thing I want to talk about is what prompted me to have this topic. When I was looking to prepare, I planned everything, I think, about 6 months ago. So when I was looking as this was coming up, I was like, wow, I'm going to talk about shame and judgment just in a brief meeting. That's really interesting that I chose this one. So I reflected about it a little bit. And what I came up with, what I remembered about why I chose this topic is really, I often hear in breathwork sessions shares where people are saying, asking the question, did I do it right? Did I do it right? I didn't have the experience I expected. Did I do it right? I think I fell asleep. Did I do it wrong? Or my mind was really chatty. Did I do it wrong? Does anybody want to share about a brief share about a moment like that in breathwork where they felt like, wow, everybody's having this experience and I'm not, or I expected this and I feel like I did it wrong, or I'm worried I breathed wrong. Anybody want to share about that? If so, go ahead and unmute yourself and share. I do have a chat comment that says, yes, all the time. I didn't breathe right. I didn't breathe deep enough. Anybody else have a time that they want to share about in chat or verbally? You can raise your hand or you can simply unmute yourself as well. Okay, so we have one person who had a moment where they just felt like they didn't do it right. That's normal. I think that one of the most powerful things about NeuroDynamic breath work for me is connecting to our inner guiding intelligence and building that relationship. And what's so powerful about that is when we begin to rely on our inner guiding intelligence, our own systems, instead of looking to a guru to tell us how to do it right or what right is. When we connect with our own inner intelligence, we get to practice allowing things to be what they are and knowing it's right for us. And that is a practice of releasing shame and judgment. Instead of judging myself for how I breathed or whether or not I was able to have a certain experience or whether or not my mind was too active, instead of doing that, I'm just honoring the experience I had and knowing it's right for me. That is a practice of releasing shame and judgment. I have another comment that says, I've been doing breath work for a while, and one time I felt like I didn't even know what I was doing. I forgot how to breathe. That's really profound. Yeah, we can forget. And it makes it easy to judge ourselves. So connecting to our inner guiding intelligence and allowing our breathwork session to be what it is and knowing that it's the right thing for us. For example, if I fall asleep in my breathwork session, instead of being mad at myself for wasting it and being frustrated that I didn't get the benefits I wanted, I try to acknowledge that I needed rest. And I often feel just so honored that my system is supporting me, knowing I need the rest. And I've just given myself the chance for self-care. So the practice of doing breath work and allowing our experience to be whatever it is becomes a practice of releasing shame and judgment. So let's talk a little bit about what shame and judgment are. I want to tell a quick story. In my Bachelor of Arts program, we did interdisciplinary studies, and we had a final one semester that was experiential based, and we were talking about culture, and we, in small groups, needed to come up with a way to express what the culture of our cohort was, what our class culture was. And as we met together, we decided we wanted to honor the way in which we were all different and look at the ways in which we were the same. So we had a series of questions that started really light and easy, like, I like ice cream. And people would walk across the line and group how much they liked ice cream. They might be on the far wall or a little more neutral, or they might hate it, so they might be on the opposite end. So people would walk up and down in a line in answer to the question we asked. So we started with really easy things. I like ice cream. I love to travel. And then we moved into more serious things. And what I noticed was on one question, the question was, I've been arrested. I've been arrested before. In my mind, I thought this was a more easy question because there's a million reasons to get arrested. And in the United States, arrested means the police have found you guilty of something, they've taken you into custody, and then you go find out and say whether or not you plead innocent or guilty and go through any charges. There are a million different reasons to be arrested, and it doesn't mean you're guilty of anything. So I thought it was an easier question. And as people moved across the line, I noticed one particular student sort of crouched down and then sat and then flopped back and forth across the line and then flopped over to the margins. And we did tell people that if they didn't want to answer a question, they could move out of the line to the margins and make sure that they weren't answering at all, so that people had a chance to opt out of answering. But this person was flopping around the line and then over to the not answer area and then back to the line and back and forth. And it was very strange. And I noticed something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. We continued on our questions. They got better. They didn't do that with any other questions. And then we talked about culture, finished our presentation. The next day, when everybody talked about the presentation, we had a lot of people who were very upset with what we had presented. And they were upset because they felt ashamed. And what came out was this particular student was having a shame response because they didn't feel like they could answer the question without being ashamed. They knew why they had been arrested. They hadn't dealt with it. They didn't feel like they could go to the not answer because then they felt like they'd be judged if they didn't answer, because then people would assume they'd done something really bad and didn't want to answer. And then they wanted to be honest. And that's why they were flopping around. And they were on the ground because they were having a response, a trauma response to the amount of shame they were having with just a simple question. It was very powerful for me, and it really highlighted how much self-judgment can be active in our lives. Does anyone want to say something about why you've decided to come to this particular talk about releasing shame and judgment? You can type it in the chat. You can also unmute to verbal share or raise your hand. And if not, that's okay. Okay. If something pops up, go ahead and type it in the chat. We're all here for different reasons. This is a powerful topic. Everyone feels shame at some point. Everyone feels self-judgment or judgment by others. Just the nature of the fact that we meet with each other and connect in different ways means that we'll have moments where this gets kicked up. And for a lot of us, it can happen quite often without us even being aware that that's what's happening. So the big thing I learned from that particular presentation was giving people permission to opt out, permission to engage to the level that they need. And this was before I knew about the inner guiding intelligence. That helps us connect and modulate how much we're sharing or not sharing so that we're supported. I see some comments. I see someone's joined this topic because it's something that they're working on. That's beautiful. For me, releasing shame and judgment is a practice. And I got to tell you, I need to practice and practice and practice. And I really have enjoyed the fact that I've embraced it as a practice, because then I'm not ashamed of having shame. I see another comment. I came because I thought This talk was about creative ways to help with integration, like drawing. Janice, yes, I'm sorry that this is not exactly what you're looking for. We are talking about creative ways to work with shame and judgment in this one. You may want to email admin@breathworkonline.com, and I'll pull one of the other recordings for you that have some other more creative ways to work with this. But before we get to the end, I will have some, rubber to the road creative ways to work with it. And I would also suggest that really connecting with movement is a great way to work with shame. And I'll work that in before we're done. So thank you for posting about that. And I do see 2 thumbs up. So we have a few people interested in that. Star, I'll be right with you. I do see your hand raised. I have a comment that says judgment of self and others, and so I can even better understand others, deepening empathy and compassion. That's beautiful. I see another post that says, just time of the class worked. So I'm interested in self-development, not specific to shame and judgment. That's lovely. I love that you have just jumped in and you're here to see what resonates and what you want to keep and what you want to let go of. Claire, I wasn't aware of today's topic, but yet this topic is timely. Oh, that's beautiful. So Star, you are unmuted. Go ahead and share.
Okay. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, so good to see you.
Hi. Thanks. Um, I'm not a good communicator, and I feel like, you know, shame has a lot to do with, like, I don't know if I can say this right, but it's like I notice that when I'm talking to other people generally, um, there's always some type of a reaction, and which causes me to feel shame.
Mm,
So it's almost like I don't know how to deal with how other people do their how they react to me, and I kind of like turn it on myself because
mhm,
I don't have the skills to be able to, like, respond in a way that I get scared immediately, and like that causes shame inside of me because I don't know, it's hard to figure it out. It's kind of like I don't want to deal with I don't know how to deal, and nor do I want to deal with what's in front of me. And so, it's like, but it's weird how it gets turned against me. Like
mhm,
I take what isn't mine and turn it against my own self. And that's kind of like the shame that I feel. So I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but
I
I
do.
think that's what I mean to say.
Mhm. I love that, and I do know what you're talking about. That's why we say self-judgment so often. It can start with a judgment from others or a worry about a judgment from others, but most often it gets turned to us and becomes self-judgment. When shame happens, we begin turning inward and judging ourselves. And that happens to so many of us. Thank you so much for that share. I really appreciate it. And it's going to help lead us into the next piece of this today. Thank you, Star. So let's talk about some of those reactions. And I'd like to, if you have a pen and paper, go ahead and grab it now. And you don't need it. And let's connect with, first, I want to connect us using our body with the different reactions we might have to some of these types of shame we might feel. So, connecting with your body, I'm going to encourage us to do a little bit of movement as well as a little bit of sensing, like paying attention and using our senses. So you can stay seated, you can stand, whatever works for you. I'm going to go through a few different things. I'm going to name them and invite you to take a pose with your body and feel where in your body you're feeling your reaction to this word. And then you might write down something about the particular word or what you're feeling, or just document that you felt it in your belly or you feel it as a tightening in your throat. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. And again, don't do the exercise. If you get triggered at all, just listen and just stay in your body, wiggle your toes, get a drink of water. But if you feel good, let's go ahead and give this a try. So let's start with that. Let's start with the word self-love. Go ahead and take a body pose for the word self-love. You can see I've got my hands are kind of like claws, which is interesting, and I'm pushing them into my heart area, and my shoulders are bowing forward. And as I'm doing that, I'm noticing I feel short of breath. I feel short of breath. So, self-love, I do feel it in my heart area. Now that you've noted that and noticed it, the next word is self-respect. And I've got my arms up, my hands are in fists. Take a pose any way you want. Use as much or as little of your body as you want. If taking a pose that isn't right for you, you can just write down. Self-respect. I'm noticing I can breathe so much easier. In fact, the top of my lungs is really open, and I feel really strong. I don't seem to have a problem with that word, self-respect. I'm going to go ahead and release that and give us a moment. Self-kindness is the next word. And you can see, like, I feel a little silly with this one. I'm noticing that. I have my hands at my face. Self-kindness. But I feel really sweet. I feel younger. I feel calm. Self-kindness. The next word I want us to invite us to do, truthfulness. Truthfulness. Take your pose. Allow your body to move into truthfulness. Notice how you feel emotionally or physically. Make any notes. Truthfulness. I'm really surprised that I feel so open with the word truthfulness today. Being judged by others. Being judged. Judgment. I notice I'm really curled in. I can really feel it in my throat and my sinuses. And I don't like the feeling in my body at all. Releasing that. The next word is self-judgment. Self-judgment. I'm gripping the backs of my upper arms. You can see. And I feel contained, overly contained. But notice what you're feeling. What are you doing? I just offer mine as one example of many different options with the exercise. Self-judgment. Just notice your emotions or your body and make a note of anything that feels important. You can see my voice got a lot quieter with that, didn't it? Isn't that wild? Just really embodying and moving, making a movement of the particular word can give so much information. Just noticing how my breath changes and noticing how my voice changes is super powerful. It tells me a lot. What that tells me is that when I'm self-judging, I silence my voice. I make it quieter. So releasing that pose, you notice I just took a deep breath because I really need to release that one because I really went into it. Okay. The next one is shame. And I don't want to take that position. So let me check out and see if it's good for me to take it or not. Yeah, I can do one. Shame. Just really a lot in my face and the top of my uh nose where I breathe in through my nose. And it's up in the back of my head. And I don't like it at all. So I'm gonna actually shake this one out. But shame has me backing up, that feeling of backing up, that feeling of not wanting to feel it or to be there. So if you need to release it or you've gotten confused at all, just wiggle your toes or wiggle your body a little bit. Take a deep breath and sigh it out. And then the last word I want to do is self-support. Self-support. So take a pose of self-support. Yeah. And just notice what comes up. I feel hopeful. I feel really hopeful. But that doesn't mean everyone feels hopeful with this particular word. Sometimes it can be triggering or feel scary or make you want to recoil the thought of supporting yourself, self-support. There are a million different reactions. So whatever your pose is right. Okay. And releasing that, making any notes. So we have some people, a couple people who have felt ashamed for being ashamed before. And clearly me as well, because just the act of wanting to move into the pose shame was something I immediately was like, heck no, I don't want to do that. Yeah. So using movement when working with shame and judgment can be exceptionally powerful for releasing it. Movement of shaking, dancing it, taking poses and releasing, and then taking another pose can help us begin to understand creatively. And that's that question. Janice was hoping to learn some creative ways to work with this. But movement is a very powerful way to work creatively with shame and judgment. Does anybody want to share in the chat how that particular movement went for you or share verbally? And again, it's not necessary. It's just an invitation to be heard about how that exercise went for you. And if it does pop up a little later as we continue on, feel free to add that to the chat. We are at the 10 o'clock mark. I apologize that I do tend to go a little bit over. I think if we do more of these in the future, I will schedule them for an hour block. It's hard to connect with shame and judgment in a supported way without taking a minute to acknowledge the topic. So my apologies for going a little bit over. If you need to leave, remember that this will be recorded and you can come back to it anytime. So the last thing I want to talk about here before we go back to talking about our breathwork practice is I want to name some of the responses very quickly. Freeze, how that can look. These are some of the responses we can have when shame comes up. We can freeze. We might silence our voice and just not say anything, and then later feel bad that we didn't say anything. So freeze is one thing that can happen. I talked a little bit about flop. That's a response. That's where we just decide to give up and not continue. Um, that's where our body might just sort of give out, like that classmate who was just shrunk down and flopped over the line and back and off to the other side and back again. Um, it's also that moment where you just get back into bed because you get so overwhelmed you just can't even, you can't even face it. That's flop. Fight. What I want to say about fight is that often with shame and judgment, the way that comes out is a belligerent clinging to being right, or to no, I'm not. That really, this isn't true. I'm right. That can happen a lot when shame gets kicked up. In fact, I was on a bus ride once, and there was someone who seemed to need a seat, but the bus was really packed. And I said to her, I would love to offer you my seat, but I'm not in a place that I can shift right now. Is there someone else that can shift? Would you like a seat? And she said, I'm not in anyone's way, and got really mad. And I said, I'm so sorry. I wasn't meaning to imply you were in anyone's way. I just wanted to offer you a seat if you needed it. And then someone else said, oh, do you need a seat? I'd love to offer you my seat. And she got so mad that she began yelling and screaming and ended up having to be kicked off the bus. And I was so sad for that because she was someone who needed support. But she felt so ashamed for having a need, and I triggered her shame response. And so she then fought with us. It was the best example of fight as a response to shame that I've ever had. So I see a comment that says, I've been in fight flight all my life, fighting for survival, but now I am in both flop and freeze. It's all gotten too much. Thank you for that share. I think that it's really so helpful to know what our responses are. Knowing your response is so powerful. I also see someone said that they've been invalidated all their life, and I just wondered whether I could chat sometime. I haven't been able to cope. Also a beautiful post. And if you can, Margaret, if you can email admin@breathworkonline.com and remind me of your comments, I would love to connect with you later. And just address it to Heidi, and they'll make sure they put it in my box. And then we can connect. So I talked about fight, I talked about flop, I talked about freeze, sometimes silencing or just feeling stuck and not moving at all, which is why movement is so helpful, and dance. Let's talk about flight. Oftentimes when we're dealing with shame and judgment, flight response looks like dissociating. Maybe you binge read novels, or you binge watch television, or turn to something else that you do a bit too much of to disconnect. Over shopping, always searching for something outside of yourself, riding roller coasters constantly. In some ways, some of these things, they aren't bad, they're supportive, but if we do it too much and we're running too much and dissociating too much, that's when it becomes a problem. So completely avoiding people because you felt ashamed, and so your friendship ends, but you love that person, but you feel too ashamed, you just can't do it, so you just cut off the friendship. That's also flight. And the last one I want to talk about is fawn. And fawn means to be overly nice and complimentary and just overly doing all of this to try and move away from the shame you're feeling. So if I feel ashamed around a certain person, I might just be, "Oh, you're so amazing. You just you do so much. I can't believe I'm not even worthy. Here's a gift. Let me give you 20 compliments. That's fun. What can I do for you? How can I make your life easier?" That's fawning. So we know fight, flight. People name those often. Um, Freeze is one. Many of us has seen a deer freeze when the headlights of an oncoming car comes. Flop, there's fainting goats. That's their mechanism. When they get scared, they faint and they just flop over dead. So there's biological reasons why we have these different ways to deal with when we're scared or ashamed. So freeze, flight, fawn, flop, fight. I encourage you to connect with yourself about these different types of responses and identify the ones that are your go-to. It doesn't mean you have to change them, but figure out for you with shame, when you feel ashamed or when you have self-judgment, identify the ones that you go to first. There's a great allegory that I love that is about awareness. If I have a cup of water and it's full and I'm about to spill it, if I don't know I have a cup, I can't do anything about it. The water's going to spill. I have to know I have a cup in my hand. And first I notice I have a cup in my hand. So noticing, that's our first step. Noticing, I have a cup in my hand. And then I have to know that it's full of that it's tilted and that it's full of water before I can ever straighten it up or set it down or drink the water. Before I can take any action to fix the issue, I have to first notice. So on the path of the practice of releasing shame and judgment is noticing. So what I'd like to encourage you all to do is either after a breathwork session or before your next breathwork session, reflect back on the session prior. And for me, it would work better to reflect on my session prior before doing the next breathwork session, because I'm typically in an altered brainwave state for quite a long time after breathwork. But for other people, doing it right after the session will be more appropriate. So there's no way to do this wrong. Just beginning to make it a part of your breathwork practice, to notice either after a session or before your next session how you were with self-judgment. So I might do a breathwork session, and then before I do the next one the following week, I would stop. And for me, I journal, so I might write down. Last session, I had self-judgment about how my thoughts were just chit-chatting constantly, and I felt like I wasn't able to breathe deep enough. So if that, so what I'm doing is I'm just journaling that and I'm noticing I wasn't able to breathe deep enough. I felt self-judgment about that. I'm not going to do anything to change it. I'm just going to spend a month, maybe 4 or 5 sessions, noticing and naming it and not judging myself about that. Just writing it down and seeing how often self-judgment is coming up in my breathwork practice. This will help me have that awareness that I talked about. It will also help me connect to my inner guiding intelligence more. Because when I name it and write it down, then I am able to stop and do the next step, which is releasing it. So after I notice it, I get to release it. I get to forgive myself for thinking I need forgiveness. One particular way that I like to release things, there's so many ways. You can just move your body and you can just go, I release the judgment. I've got my hands out like this. So you can take a breath and do a pose with your arms, releasing your hands, whatever way is appropriate for you. Breath and a movement and saying, I release this judgment. Or I like to say a sentence that says, I validate and acknowledge that I feel a little bit of shame about how much my mind was chit-chatting during my last breathwork session. I notice it in my body right around my throat. My throat is tight. I ask, desire, and will, and release it with love and replace it with a feeling of I'm doing exactly what I need to do. So let me break that sentence down. I validate and acknowledge whatever the feeling is and name whatever the shame and judgment is. And then I notice it in my body. And then I release it and replace it instead with whatever other feeling you want. So name what it is, acknowledge it, notice where it is in your body, and then with your will, replace it with what you want to replace it with. So either way to do that is right, just releasing it with a breath and saying, I release it, and a movement, or using a sentence, whatever works for you to release it. So first noticing, second releasing, and the third is rescripting. And that sentence I gave you helps you rescript. So because we validate it, we notice it, and then we replace it with something else. So rescripting it. Another way to rescript is to instead, I'm feeling shame about the chit chat mind I had in my session. I feel it mostly in my throat. I know that I am doing this practice of breath work and self-support, and I know that whatever I feel and however that happens is right for me. So rescripting is reconnecting to your inner guiding intelligence and remembering, just like when you get a cut and it scabs over and then it heals, remembering that that happens with our inner guiding intelligence as well. Knowing that it's there, it's giving us the session that we need, it's giving us the experience in breathwork we need, rescripts that from a moment of shame to a moment of, wow, I am walking this practice. I'm doing what I need to do. So, does anyone have any quick questions about noticing, releasing, and rescripting? No. So let's throw in another way to do this real quick for those who wanted more art connected ways to do it. So you could also, after each breathwork practice or before your next one, you could notice how much shame you have about how the session went for you. You could find an image that looks like how you're feeling about that, how much shame you're having. So you could find a postcard picture or do a little collage or do a scribble drawing, any kind of imagery for how that was for you. Then you can release it by tearing that scribble drawing or deleting that image you found. And you can rescript it by finding a new image or doing a new scribble drawing that shows that you honor the breathwork practice you did have. So find something that is a picture that reminds you of how the breathwork practice felt. So instead of shaming yourself for what you didn't have, You're acknowledging what you did have with another image. So that's one way to do it with art or drawing or collage or imagery. A way to do that with movement is after your session, do a dance about the shame that came up. It can be a 30-second dance. It can be a 3-minute dance. Just do a dance, a movement around your room, or take a pose. And then release it. Shake all over or release the pose. And then to rescript it, do a dance honoring that you are doing this practice. So dance a prayer of gratitude to yourself for doing the practice of breath work and for doing the practice of becoming aware of shame and judgment. So that's 3 different ways to notice any shame and judgment in your breathwork practice, release any shame and judgment in your breathwork practice, and rescript it. So moving it out of shame and instead moving it into gratitude to yourself for knowing and noticing. So today we talked about the knot of shame. We talked about how to be centered, how to center and presence. We talked about when shame is kicked up, often our minds get confused and buzzy, and that wiggling your toes or drinking cold water can help you connect. We talked about how I believe that the breathwork practice for NeuroDynamic breathwork is really a practice in releasing shame and judgment. Every session where we're like, I expected this, or did I do it right, or all of that, every time, that's a way to connect to our inner guiding intelligence and release that self-judgment of things having to be a certain way and allowing to be whatever they are. That is a practice of releasing shame and judgment. We talked about our different reactions to some of the themes and words that have to do with shame and judgment. And we talked about the responses we often have: freeze, flight, fawn, flop, and fight. And then we talked about how to use your breathwork practice to really connect with first becoming aware of when shame comes up. After we become aware, then we can begin moving to the next step of actively working to release it. And then after we can release it, then following up with rescripting, coming back up to instead honor and connect with self-love and honor allowing ourselves to be who we are, honoring our inner guiding intelligence. So that is it for this presentation. If you want more, again, email us and let us know. I really want to thank all of you for the comments, for being here and engaging in whatever level you're engaging in. And like I said, releasing shame and judgment is a practice. I do it every single day. And the more I am able to notice when I have self-judgment or when I feel judged by others or when I'm having a shame response, the more I'm able to do that, the more I'm able to then move on to releasing it and rescripting it. So I hope that your breathwork practice supports you. I hope that all of you are able to connect with your inner guiding intelligence, and that if this process of spending the next month or so before or after your breathwork practices, connecting with noticing any shame or self-judgment that comes up about doing it right, I hope that if that's right for you, you're able to enact it. I don't have a website, but I'm in the middle of making a website. And Margaret, if you email admin@breathworkonline.com, I'll make sure that I send you the recording link as well as soon as it comes out. So that will come out in either this coming Tuesday or next Tuesday, depending on how quickly we get this uploaded. I have a nice comment that says, "Thank you. That was beautiful. I'll begin using it as a practice. Much appreciated. Love to you and everyone here." Thank you so much. That's beautiful. So the way I like to end is again checking in with our bodies, our minds. Are we feeling any confusion? Our bodies, are we still centered? Do we still feel connected, supported? I'm really feeling my chair supporting me right now. Wiggling your toes is a superpower. Let's take a breath together in through our nose and out through our mouth. And then take a moment to check in. How are you feeling now? Go ahead and type one word into the chat about how you're feeling now. I feel bright, and I'm really feeling it in my cheeks. So go ahead and type that in. I see one person typed in happy. Beautiful. And again, the whole range of responses is beautiful. I will say beautiful if someone said, I feel sad now. That's also beautiful. Wherever you are, go ahead and just type one word to check out, and I'll read them. Relaxed, we say calm, no longer frazzled. Wow. Cared. Oh, that's beautiful. Peaceful. Beautiful. And once you've typed in chat, you can stay until everyone does a checkout, or you can just hop off. This is the last thing we're doing. Let's wait a moment for any more words that people want to type in about how they are now. Again, thank you all for attending. We have thank you. Really appreciate you being here. Again, we also have a comment. Thanks. Blessings to all. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your day. Make sure to stop and get a cold drink of water or step outside for a moment before you move into the rest of your day, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening for you. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for your presence here. All right. With that, we are complete.